You arrive in the world not like a prince, but like a tax, a complication, a redundancy. You are the second-born son of a minor noble family in feudal Europe, which is the medieval equivalent of being handed a lottery ticket that someone's already scratched and lost. The room you're born in isn't exactly a palace. It's a half-lit chamber that smells of mildew, tallow, afterbirth, and the slow death of family ambition. The walls are stone, damp to the touch. There's hay on the floor, not for comfort, for soaking up fluids. The midwife isn't smiling. She's muttering something under her breath that sounds suspiciously like a prayer or a curse. Same thing, really, depending on the mood. Your mother? She's pale, exhausted, and possibly infected. She doesn't hold you, not out of cruelty, but because she already knows what's coming. She's seen it before, maybe with her own brothers, maybe with her own second son, stillborn last winter. A spare heir is like bread crust, hard to chew and rarely missed. Your father enters the room. He doesn't ask how you are. He asks one thing. Is it a boy? When the midwife nods, he grunts. Not with joy, with logistics. Because now he has two sons, which means two mouths to feed, two sets of expectations, and only one inheritance to go around. Congratulations. Your first act on Earth was to trigger a minor estate crisis. Primogeniture, the law of the land, states clearly, the firstborn son gets everything. Not because he's better, not because he's smarter, just because he had the good manners to exit the womb first. He is the heir. You're the medieval version of a Plan B. In theory, useful. In practice, unwanted. From the moment your umbilical cord hits the floor, your destiny narrows. The family won't educate you out of love. They'll educate you out of necessity. You need to be molded into something useful. A monk, perhaps. Or a soldier. Or, if all else fails, a pawn in a marriage alliance so cold and political it could freeze your soul in July. But for now, you're just a baby. And babies, even cursed ones, must be swaddled. They wrap you in cloth that was probably last used to clean a saddle. You itch before you can think. You're placed in a cradle that creaks like it remembers better times. Perhaps when your brother used it, freshly anointed with family pride. Now it's your turn, little echo. Your role to not ruin anything. You grow fast. Not because anyone wants you to, but because food, when available, is shared by necessity, not affection. Your nursemaid is gruff and always slightly sticky. You learn to crawl on stone floors, to sleep through your brother's Latin lessons, and to eat whatever isn't moving too fast. Your older brother is being trained to lead. He gets fencing lessons, Latin tutors, a pony that's only slightly homicidal. You get silence, observation, and the occasional crust of bread hurled in your direction like a blessing. You're not hated exactly, just filtered out, like background noise. Every once in a while, a visiting priest will pat your head and say something patronizing like, "Ah, the second son. Perhaps he'll serve the church, eh?" Everyone chuckles. You do not. By the time you're 7, you've absorbed an unspoken truth. Love in this house is conditional. Survival is not about being wanted, it's about being useful. And the possibilities? Slim. If you're lucky, they'll send you to a monastery. Not because you're devout, but because monasteries are where noble families stash inconvenient children. He has a calling, they'll say, while pushing you onto a mule with a sack of oats and a future of silent prayers and cold stone. If you're unlucky, they'll decide you have promise and ship you off to train as a knight, which means 10 years of falling off horses, getting thwacked with sticks, and eating things that may or may not have once been pigeons. All while your brother practices writing his name on treaties, and if you're really unlucky, you'll be kept around as a political chip, a walking, talking, bargaining tool. Your job? To marry someone unappealing but strategically advantageous. Maybe she's older, maybe she's 12, maybe she has a face that scares mirrors. Doesn't matter. You'll wed. You'll obey. You'll produce children who will also be second sons, and the cycle continues. At night, when the castle quiets down and the candles flicker low, you lie awake in your cot, the smaller one, near the window with the draft. You listen to the wind, the mice, the echoes of footsteps that never stop. You wonder if maybe, just maybe, there's more for someone like you. But in this century, there isn't. You are a second son, and in the grand script of medieval life, you were written in pencil. Excellent. Let's march deeper into the medieval muck. You're 10 years old now, and you already know too much about silence. Not the peaceful kind, not the hush of a warm room after laughter. No, you know the silence of being overlooked, of existing just enough to fetch firewood, but never enough to shape legacy. The kind of silence that smells faintly of cold porridge and old parchment, because those are your main companions. Your older brother, let's call him Edric, because of course his name is Edric, is being groomed. Not in the suspicious modern sense, but in the thoroughly medieval one. Endless etiquette lessons, hawking, hunting, heraldry, and how not to fall asleep during Latin Mass. He's already had his portrait painted. His face is oval, unsmiling, with the kind of vacant nobility that says, I will one day own people. You're being observed, assessed, quietly filed under options, because in a noble household, second sons aren't loved, they're sorted. And now, the sorting begins. Option 1, the monk. One frosty morning, your father clears his throat, the same throat he usually reserves for announcing bad harvests or indigestion. The boy shows piety, he lies. You've been caught napping in the chapel twice, and once tried to eat the communion wafer before the priest handed it to you. But piety? No one's checking too closely. Monks are useful. They don't marry, they don't fight, and most importantly, they don't inherit. They send you to visit an abbey. The journey takes 2 days by ox cart, and you spend most of it trying not to freeze or vomit. The monk who greets you has the eyes of someone who's seen too many winters and not enough wine. He smells like candle wax and boiled onions. You're shown the scriptorium, silent, cold, and full of pale men muttering in Latin and slowly losing their eyesight over crumbling manuscripts. They hand you a quill. You blot ink across an entire page. He's spirited, the abbot says, which is monastic for absolutely not. You return home to silence, again. Nobody speaks of the monastery. But one night, you hear your father mutter, perhaps the sword then. Option 2, the mercenary. You're 11 when a grizzled knight arrives at the castle. He smells of leather, sweat, and a mild but persistent blood aroma. He's missing 2 fingers and 1 moral compass. Perfect mentor material. Your father introduces him as Sir Hadric, a man who forged his fortune in battle. You notice he also forged most of his teeth from metal. You're handed a wooden sword. The weight is wrong. Your hands blister in minutes. You get knocked on your back repeatedly. Sir Hadric roars with laughter. He's soft as pudding, he declares. You bleed from the lip and try not to cry. Not because you're brave, but because Edric is watching, smirking. For 6 months, you're trained, which means beaten, bruised, and occasionally complimented when you manage to stay conscious. You learn how to ride without vomiting, how to swing a sword without taking your own ear off, and how to sleep in armor. The trick is, you don't. Your reward? A letter, sealed with wax. An opportunity, a marriage proposal. Option 3, the deal. She's 15, you're 12. Her name is Adeline, and she's the niece of a minor baron who has more sheep than gold, but fewer heirs than options. She has smallpox scars, a quick wit, and a gaze that could melt pewter. You meet her once. She sizes you up like livestock. At least you're not drooling, she says. You fall in love instantly, or something like it. Your father smiles for the first time in your presence. You'll have land, he says, and obligations, which, in noble terms, means taxes, vassals, and the very real possibility of dying in a minor border dispute. You're suddenly valuable, not for yourself, but for your ability to connect 2 bloodlines through legal paperwork and awkward dinners. Your mother weeps quietly, maybe for joy, maybe for relief, or maybe because she remembers what it means to marry someone you barely know who smells of horse and adolescent panic. And just like that, your path is chosen. But here's the twist. None of these options are victories. The monk forfeits his name, the knight forfeits his limbs, the husband forfeits his dreams, and probably most of his hair by 30. You're 12, and you've already buried 3 possible versions of yourself in cold, medieval soil. But still, you live. You eat stale bread. You drink thin ale. You study maps. You memorize the family crest. You learn how to sit still while men talk around you. And you pray, not out of belief, but out of exhaustion. Because one day, they'll all expect you to become something. And all you've ever been is Plan B. You wake up in straw. Not the golden, sun-kissed kind poets pretend smells like summer and innocence, but the sharp, damp, flea-infested variety that pokes your ribs and whispers, "You're still not the heir." You're 13 now, and every day begins with a different version of pain. Sword drills, horse taming, cold water poured over your head because someone decided that suffering builds character, especially for second sons. Your squire training has officially begun. That means you are now a servant to someone who is only slightly less unimportant than the people who command you. You clean armor, polish boots, and shovel what the war horses leave behind. You also wake before the sun, because the sun has dignity. You, on the other hand, have duty. And blisters. Sir Hadric, your half-rotting mentor, watches you swing a training sword like it personally offended your ancestors. Again, he growls for the 12th time. You do it. Again. And again. Until your arms feel like boiled turnips, and your tunic is soaked through with sweat and regret. He grabs your elbow. Wrong grip, he snarls. Hold it like you're trying to keep your brother from stealing your name. You know better than to say he already did. The castle yard is your classroom, mud is your textbook, pain your tutor. You're taught to ride, badly. Your first fall dislocates your shoulder. No one rushes to help. They wait to see if you cry. You don't, at least not while anyone's looking. Later, in the stables, you bite into a piece of cloth and scream into a pile of straw that smells like a wet animal died in it. Probably because one did. They teach you to clean wounds, not yours. Stitch a gash with shaking fingers. Hold pressure on a belly cut until the blood stops or the breathing does. Every skill you learn is soaked in someone else's misfortune. This is not preparation for greatness. This is preparation for dying for someone else's glory. Meals are brief, brutal affairs. A hunk of black bread that could blunt a dagger. A ladle of cabbage stew that's more water than flavor. Meat is rare, and when it appears, it's usually something that's squealed. You eat fast, because hesitation means hunger. You learn to chew with your mouth half open, not because you're rude, but because your teeth hurt, and you're 13 with jaw pain from being punched during practice. One day, you're ordered to serve at your brother's feast. Edric, glowing with entitlement, sits at the high table. He's now 15 and growing into his future like a hand slipping into a custom glove. He laughs with guests, talks politics, drinks wine diluted just enough to keep him clever, not clumsy. You refill his goblet. He doesn't look at you, but he does say, loudly, "It's good to have loyal hands in the family, isn't it, Father?" Everyone laughs. You stare at the table and try not to imagine what it would feel like to push him into the fire pit. You are not allowed to dream. Dreams are for heirs. You are allowed to serve, to train, to be ready. Ready for what? No one tells you. A campaign? A border skirmish? A chance to die honorably in armor that isn't even yours? The best case scenario is your brother dies in a hunting accident. The worst case scenario is he lives to be 80. One night in the barracks, you listen to the older squires talk. One has a scar down his spine from a mock battle. Another limps from falling down the keep stairs while carrying a chamber pot too full to slosh. They laugh. You don't. Instead, you stare at the beams above your head, counting the cracks and wondering which direction is north. You fantasize about running away, to sea, to the Holy Land, to anywhere your last name doesn't come with an asterisk. But then you remember, even if you run, you'll still be a second son. Your tutor, a sour-faced priest with a permanently ink-stained thumb, tries to teach you Latin. He fails. Not because you're stupid, but because your brain is too full of battle drills and bruised ribs to care what the subjunctive form of essay is. Discipline, he hisses. A noble man must have a mind as sharp as his sword. You glance down at your calloused hands, the purpled bruise across your forearm, and the ink blot that's turned your scroll into abstract art. You do not feel noble. You feel like a very expensive disappointment. One day, after hours of sword forms in the rain, Sir Hadric hands you a real blade. Not a wooden one, not blunted steel. Real, heavy, balanced, capable of ending conversations in a single stroke. You take it. He watches. You swing. Too slow. He parries, disarms you, and knocks you flat into a puddle. The sword lands beside your head. He leans down. Next time, don't hesitate. You look at the blade. You look at him. You do not say what you're thinking, because you're finally learning. Hesitation is how second sons die. You go to bed soaked to the bone, skin raw, soul thinner by the day. You lie awake, hearing the wind slip through the cracks in the stone wall, whispering old secrets. Secrets like, you were never meant to inherit, but you can still take something. You drift off, not with peace, but with purpose. The horns blow before dawn, not the melodic, ceremonial kind. These are guttural, cracked, and urgent, like the castle itself is trying to cough up a warning. You're 15 now, just old enough to bleed usefully, but not quite old enough to be mourned by name. When the steward yells your name, you sit up in your straw-stuffed pallet, heart already sprinting. You throw on your gear, chainmail that still smells of someone else's fear, a padded gambeson soaked in old sweat, greaves that don't quite fit. Your helmet wobbles slightly when you move your head. It belonged to someone who no longer needs it, a cousin maybe, or a knight whose name no one says anymore. You meet Sir Hadric in the yard. His armor is dented, his eyes are red, and he's eating raw onion for breakfast. He hands you a sword and mutters, "Don't think. Just kill whoever doesn't smell like us." You want to laugh, but your throat is too tight. This isn't training. This is your first actual fight. A border skirmish, they said. Just a few angry barons clashing steel over disputed sheep, burned fences, or an insult made over too much ale. But to you, this might as well be the apocalypse. You mount your horse, barely. He's old, annoyed, and aware that you're not in charge. As you ride through the gate, the wind bites. Your breath clouds. The forest ahead doesn't look like a battlefield. It looks like a place where things go missing. The other squires are quiet. The knights are louder, trying to drown their own fear with jokes, boasts, and bad singing. You grip your sword hilt until your knuckles go white. Sir Hadric claps you on the back. If you die well, your father might actually remember your name. You almost vomit. The clash comes suddenly. A flurry of banners, hooves, steel, and shouting. You see faces distorted by helmets and hate. You raise your sword because that's what you were trained to do. And then everything goes sideways. Literally, a horse barrels into yours. You hit the ground so hard it knocks the air out of you. Your helmet rolls off. Mud fills your mouth. You taste earth, blood, and metal. Somewhere a man screams like his insides are being unknotted. You crawl. Someone steps on your hand. You swing upward, blindly. Your blade hits something soft. A scream. You don't look to see who it was. You don't want to know. A figure looms, massive, armored, with a mace. You freeze. And that's when Sir Hadric saves your life. He tackles the man. Steel meets bone. You hear a crack, like a tree splitting in winter. Blood spatters your face. It's warm, shockingly warm. Sir Hadric growls at you. Get up. Fight or die. You get up. You fight. You do not die. But something inside you does. Hours later, the enemy retreats, or maybe your side does. It's hard to tell who won. Bodies litter the field like discarded promises. You step over someone who looks your age, face frozen mid-scream. You try not to look at his eyes. You fail. Your sword is nicked. Your arms ache. Your tunic is soaked in blood. Some yours, most not. You don't remember how many you killed. 2? 1? Was it even you? No one cheers. There is no glory. There's just exhaustion. Back at the castle, they serve stew. It tastes like sawdust and despair. You eat anyway. Every bite reminds you you're still alive, which feels more confusing than triumphant. Your brother doesn't ask how it went. Your father nods once and says, "You've done your part." That's it. No feast. No honor. No new title. Just your part. You're not a hero. You're an expendable boy in borrowed armor who got lucky. That night, you sit by the fire. Your hands tremble when they're not gripping the mug of ale. You stare at the flames and realize you weren't fighting for honor, or land, or even your own future. You were almost killed for someone else's name. Your brother's, your father's, the family crest, the one etched into the chest plate that didn't stop the arrow. You were a warm body in the right place at the right time. You lived because Sir Hadric was near, and someone else was slower than you. You wonder what would have happened if you died. Would Edric have cared? Would your father have buried you? Would they have even used your name? You stare into the fire until it's just embers. You don't cry, you plan. Because if you're going to die next time, and there will be a next time, it better be your war, not theirs. They come for you after breakfast, not with chains, but with smiles. That's worse. It starts with a letter, sealed in red wax, brought by a pale man on a pale horse. He doesn't dismount. Just delivers the message to your father, who reads it like someone trying to swallow bile. Then he looks at you, not with pride or even relief, just calculation, like he's trying to decide whether to keep feeding you or send you off like bad debt. "The abbot wants you," he says flatly. You don't ask why. You already know. You're not being sent to pray. You're being offered, like bread at a poor feast. Because even a second son can serve a purpose, especially when the church has land, influence, and a desperate need for boys who won't inherit anything useful. 2 days later, you ride with a priest named Father Osric, whose breath smells like vinegar and guilt. He talks the whole way. About sin, about humility, about the joy of obedience. You nod occasionally and wonder if anyone's ever pushed a cleric off a cart and gotten away with it. The monastery appears over a hill like a stone scab on the landscape. Cold, closed, timeless in the worst way, as if nothing has changed inside for centuries, including the hygiene. You're greeted by silence, no welcome, no ceremony. Just a nod from a monk whose robe has more patches than fabric. He gestures for you to follow. You pass through a courtyard where other boys, novitiates, scrub stones with frozen hands. One of them coughs. No one reacts. You smell ash, wax, wet wool, and something faintly resembling boiled cabbage. You're shown to your cell. It's not a room. It's a box. A wooden cot, a bucket, a tiny window that lets in light, but not hope. The door closes behind you with a thud that sounds disturbingly like forever. Your new life begins at 3:45 a.m. The bells ring. Not like music, like accusation. You rise in the dark, dress in rough linen that chews your skin, and shuffle into a line of boys who all look like they've been here too long to remember why. Morning prayers are in Latin. You don't understand them. You mouth the words anyway, like a puppet mouthing the wind. Then comes work. Hours of copying texts by candlelight. Not glorious scrolls or beautiful manuscripts, but inventory logs, tax records, and treatises on theological points so obscure they make your teeth itch. Your pen is a sharpened feather. Your ink smells like iron and regret. One mistake, one blot, and you start again. After that, more prayers. Then chores, then silence. Always silence. If you speak, they remind you, The tongue is the whip of the devil, so you learn to think quietly and plot even quieter. Once a week, you're allowed to walk the herb garden. It smells like sage, thyme, and faintly buried despair. One afternoon, while kneeling to weed near the garlic, you hear whispers. Two monks talking behind a wall. They say he's a noble's second son, one mutters. A spare, the other chuckles. Poor soul. They laugh. You press your hands into the dirt until your nails bend. You do not speak, because they're right. You're not here because of calling. You're here because you're disposable. Father Osric visits once a month. He asks if you found peace. You say yes. He smiles like that's what he wanted to hear, not what he believes. He brings letters from your father. Short, cold, strategic. One simply reads, "The bishop is watching. Do not embarrass us." Another, "Your brother is to be married in spring." No, "How are you?" No, "Do you miss home?" Only duty, only control. At night, you lie on your cot, the straw poking through the thin blanket, and you stare at the ceiling, a rough slab of wood where mice sometimes skitter. You listen to the wind against the stone. You pray, but not to God. You pray to anyone who might be listening, "Let me out." Not because you hate the church, not because you love the world, but because this life doesn't fit. It chafes like your robe. It smells like someone else's destiny. One evening, you're summoned to the abbot's chamber. He is old, skeletal, with eyes like tarnished glass. He doesn't waste time. You are literate, useful, quiet.
"We could train you further, perhaps even send you to the cathedral." You don't answer. "You could rise," he says, "if you obey." There it is, the offer, not of holiness, but of survival. A life of ink and obedience, of chanting other men's beliefs, of never being asked who you really are. You nod, because you've learned. Sometimes you say yes, while planning your escape. They send for you 3 weeks before the wedding, not with urgency, with etiquette. A monk hands you the letter as if it were a dead bird. It reads, "Return to the estate for your brother's union. Appear presentable." No, "We hope you're well." No, "We miss you." Just instructions. The kind carved into ice. You ride alone. The monastery fades behind you, replaced by hills that once felt like home, and now feel like someone else's dream. You smell grass, dung, and the bittersweet sting of familiarity. The castle rises on the horizon like a scar that never closed. The guards at the gate barely recognize you. Your robe is tattered, your boots thin. They let you in with polite disinterest. And suddenly, you're 13 again. The second son with nothing to inherit and too much to prove. The wedding preparations have swallowed the estate. Silk banners hang from windows. Minstrels tune their lutes with the desperation of men who know they're being paid in bread. The kitchens roar with activity, boiling, baking, bleeding things. There's laughter, there's music. There is not, however, any space for you. Your brother, Edric, greets you with the same smile he uses on visiting lords, polished, detached, and ever so slightly patronizing. "You're still alive," he says, amused. You don't answer. You notice his new tunic, deep red, embroidered with gold thread. You notice his belt, his boots, the sword at his hip that was once your grandfather's. You also notice that he hasn't asked how you've been, because it doesn't matter. You're not here to be seen. You're here to stand, in formation, in silence.
Like furniture that shares your blood. The bride arrives 2 days later, Lady Isolde of Westmere, 17, tall, pale, graceful in the way that makes you want to hate her and pity her at the same time. She smiles like someone who's practiced every day since childhood. Her dowry is vast. Her future is fixed. Her gaze, when it meets yours across the hall, lingers just one heartbeat too long. She knows. She knows who you are. The brother. The other one. You're not invited to the high table at the feast. You sit with minor cousins, lesser knights, and a man who may or may not be part of the staff. The bread is hard, the wine is thin, and the laughter floats from the main table like perfume through a grate. You watch Edric lift his goblet, hear him make toasts in Latin he barely understands. You listen to your father declare alliances, bloodlines, and glory. You keep your hands folded and your tongue tied. The food tastes like ashes. Later that night, you walk the empty halls, barefoot, cloaked in wool and thoughts. You pass the library where you once failed at Latin, the chapel where you nearly fainted from fasting, the stables where you bled from your first fall. Each room remembers. Each stone knows your name, the forgotten one. In the corridor near the solar, you hear whispers, laughter, her voice, Isolde. You pause, you should leave. You don't. You hear Edric, his voice smug and heavy with wine. I'll have the lands, the title, and the heir within the year. He doesn't say your name, but you feel erased anyway. The ceremony is long, holy, performed by a bishop with a chin that resembles a chicken's knee. Everyone pretends it's sacred, but you know it's theater. You know what's really being exchanged. Not love, power, gold. Future children with the right last names. You watch from the third row, half hidden behind a pillar. Your mother glances back once, not with affection, with curiosity, as if wondering whether you'll behave. You do, of course you do. At the final feast, you drink more than you should. You dance less than you'd like. Lady Isolde dances with Edric, with nobles, with cousins, with the bishop. Eventually, she dances alone. You watch her, distant, composed, glass-eyed. She sees you. You look away. That night, you're not given a chamber. You sleep in the old barracks, surrounded by dust and memories. You lie awake and think of the road back to the monastery. The silence, the ink, the walls. You think of your brother, warm in bed, drunk on victory. You think of Isolde and what she saw in your eyes. In the morning, no one says goodbye. You leave before dawn. The gate creaks behind you like an old man sighing. You ride out alone. But this time, something rides with you. Not shame, not envy. Something colder, clearer, resolve. It starts with fire, not the romantic kind, not torches or candles. No, this is the angry kind, the kind that eats barns, blinds horses, and sends smoke howling through the halls before anyone can scream. You're 20 now. The estate is quiet that night. You're visiting again, briefly, summoned for another ceremony where Edric gets something, and you stand behind him like a polite ghost. You're in the stables when it begins. A lantern tips, or a servant stumbles, or maybe someone meant for it to happen. By the time you sprint to the courtyard, the west wing is lit like Judgment Day. Screams, shadows, guards scrambling like ants over boiling water. You don't think. You move. You grab buckets. You shout orders. You pull two children out from a smoke-choked corridor and slap a steward who's frozen in fear. You lead. You act. You command. And for the first time, no one hesitates. Not because you're noble, because you're right. When the fire's out, dawn is already bleeding into the sky. The building is damaged but standing. A few rooms lost, one servant dead, another injured. But it could have been worse. Much worse. Edric is shaken. So is your father. Neither of them moved during the chaos. They were pulled to safety and stayed there, protected, preserved, uninvolved. The household talks. They say it was the second son who saved the hall, a maid murmurs. I saw him drag that boy out myself, says a guard. He kept shouting like a knight, whispers a page. You don't correct them. You just sit, filthy, bruised, and silent. Something inside you is awake and hungry. For the next few days they treat you differently, not like the heir, not quite like a hero, but like someone they hadn't seen before, someone they might have underestimated. You walk the halls with bandages on your hands and mud on your boots, and people nod. Not politely, respectfully. Even Edric, especially Edric. He doesn't thank you. He's not built for gratitude, but he watches you now, like a man watching his own shadow stretch. The steward falls ill. Your father appoints you, temporarily, to oversee repairs. You handled the fire, you can handle masonry, he says, as if complimenting a well-trained dog. You accept. And suddenly, you have tasks, authority, letters to write, men to instruct, coin to allocate, decisions to make, minor ones, but real. You sit at a desk that was never meant for you. You sign your name where others expected it never to be written. And the castle obeys. You walk the perimeter at dusk, survey the labor, speak with masons, negotiate with a merchant who dares to overcharge. You raise your voice, and it works. You begin to see how things function, who's lazy, who lies, who listens. You understand now why your father looked at maps more than faces, why Edric learned to smile without blinking, why titles matter. You understand because you feel it, the weight of almost important, almost powerful, almost something. Then, one night, Isolde finds you, in the chapel, alone. She stands beside you, wrapped in a cloak the color of mourning. Her face is unreadable. Her hands, gloveless, rest on the cold stone of the altar rail. "You were impressive," she says. You don't reply. She doesn't need you to. "There was a moment," she continues, "when I forgot which brother was supposed to be in charge." You turn your head slowly. She's not smiling. She's remembering. You're both remembering. 2 days later, the steward recovers. Your father thanks you, formally, publicly, briefly, then strips you of your duties. Edric resumes command. The mason stops bowing. The merchant sends inflated prices again. You are, once more, the second son. You pack to return to the monastery. Your father doesn't stop you. Your brother nods. Isolde watches from a window, her expression stone. As you ride away, the weight in your chest isn't grief. It's rage, cold, clean, clarifying. You tasted it. You held it. You know now, power is not a birthright. It's a habit, and habits can be stolen. It happens quietly, not with a scream, or a sword drawn in moonlight, or a forbidden kiss behind the chapel. No. The moment you stop being good isn't a climax. It's a crack. Barely audible, but deep. It begins on the road back to the monastery. The same worn trail. The same pine-sour air. The same itch of wool at your throat. But something's changed. Not outside. Inside. A friction where obedience used to be. You pass a beggar. He doesn't look up. You don't give alms. 2 years ago, you would've. Dutiful, pious, proper. Now, you don't even slow the horse. At the monastery, they notice it too. Your bowed head is a little too deliberate. Your amens arrive half a beat late. You copy manuscripts with perfect precision, but zero care. The ink dries without soul. You're praised for your discipline. No one sees the rot beneath it. Father Osric greets you in the scriptorium. "You've matured," he says, smiling. You nod. He means you're quieter now. He doesn't realize it's because you've stopped asking permission to hate everything. One night, you steal bread. Not because you're starving, because you can. You take it from the cellar, a crust meant for Sunday's meal. You eat it cold, outside, beside the pig shed. It's stale, and tastes like damp flour and disobedience. No one notices. You feel nothing, which is worse than guilt. Later, you begin forging letters. Harmless ones at first. Notes of gratitude, a response to the bishop's inquiry, a copied blessing with your abbot's seal. Your hand is perfect, your Latin, fluent, your confidence, surgical. You realize you could rewrite anything, anyone. You could bend truth with ink. You do. When a merchant's cart overturns outside the monastery gate, you organize the rescue, not out of kindness, out of instinct. Command comes naturally now. You speak. Men move. The merchant, grateful, offers you coin. You hesitate. Then you take it. Not much. Just enough. Just enough to buy ink that no one logs. You begin collecting names of men who owe favors, of novices who hate the church but fear starvation more, of monks with secrets. You don't blackmail. Not yet. But you know. And knowledge is just violence waiting for a reason. You write a letter to your brother, A polite one, congratulating him on the new heir. You sign your name with perfect strokes. You include a quote from scripture, something about duty. Then you burn it before sending. You just wanted to see how it felt. Then comes the day the bishop visits. You're 21, calm, clean, respected. You're called to serve at dinner. The bishop compliments your penmanship, your abbot beams, and the bishop says, almost casually, "There is a need in Westmere, a trusted scribe, discreet, noble-born, educated, loyal." Everyone looks at you. You look at no one. You say, "I would be honored." And in that moment, you stop being good. You become something else entirely. A man who waited, who watched, who smiled while learning where the cracks in the walls were. And now you're inside them. Westmere smells different, not better, just richer. Less of boiled root and moldy vellum, more of crushed herbs, smoke from good wood, and the faint perfume of anxiety. Nobility here walks softer, but watches harder. You arrive dressed in humility and silence. A monk's robe, a noble's bearing. You speak little, bow often, listen more, and they love you for it. Because Westmere, like all noble houses, is a place built on panic barely restrained by protocol. And you, calm, literate, unthreatening, are exactly what they think they need. You're placed under Lord Halric, Isolde's aging uncle. He rules by habit more than strategy. His hands tremble, his memory stutters, but his seal still opens gates. He hands you ledgers, treaties, decrees. "Organize these," he says, as if that's an insult. You nod. Inside, you grin. In 3 weeks, you learn everything. How much grain is hoarded, which steward is stealing, who owes coin to whom, and why it matters. You memorize the corridors, the servants' entrances, the wine cellar's back door. You learn that Lady Isolde receives letters she never shares, and that Lord Halric's heir, her cousin Warwick, is more interested in hawking and ale than land or law. And most importantly, no one fears you. Not yet, which makes you invisible. And invisibility is power. One morning, Halric asks your opinion. Not publicly, not formally. Just a quiet, "Should we raise the toll at Millbridge?" You say, "It would anger the farmers." He waits. You add, "But if you raised it in winter, when traffic slows, the merchants would absorb the loss and forget it by spring." He grunts, then does it. No credit, no praise. But 2 days later, you're asked to write the official decree, and your handwriting carries the weight of a lord. Isolde avoids you at first. She passes in halls like wind, soft, fast, gone. But then one evening she enters the library while you're alone, transcribing old charters. She says nothing, just walks to the shelf, selects a book she doesn't open, and stands beside your table. Her perfume is subtle, not sweet, herbal, sharp. You keep writing. She keeps pretending. After a minute, she says, "My husband speaks of you." You pause. Not long, just enough. "And you, my lady?" She doesn't answer. She doesn't need to. Your name spreads, but softly, not shouted, whispered. The steward refers to you as the quiet one. The guards nod. The scribes defer. The cook asks your opinion on salt rations. No one above you acknowledges your rising influence. That's how you know it's real. When power becomes loud, it's already threatened. Yours is still silent, still growing. One afternoon, a writer brings news from your father's estate. Your brother is ill, very ill. You're invited to return. You don't. You send a letter instead. Polite, formal, cold. You do not ask about his condition. You do not offer blessings. You write, "May the estate remain stable in this time of uncertainty." It is not a wish. It is a test. 3 days later, Lord Halric falls from his horse. Nothing fatal. Just enough to remind everyone that time is sharpening its knife. He recovers slowly. While he rests, you run everything. Not officially, but no paper moves without your hand. No word spreads without your phrasing. Isolde sees this. She says, "You're efficient." You say, "I was taught by necessity." She doesn't smile, but she doesn't leave. That night you sit in the old chapel, alone. You light a candle, not to pray, to watch the flame, to remind yourself, fire changes everything. It doesn't ask permission. It doesn't explain. It just is. And you are becoming fire. 10. The brother, you buried without touching a shovel. 900 words. The letter arrives folded in black wax. The seal is your family's, but distorted, as if the stamp slipped before it cooled, leaving a blurred impression of a lion that's lost its jaw. Inside, 3 lines. Edric has died. Pneumonia. Sudden. The estate calls. You read it once, then again. Then you put it in the fire before anyone else can see it. You watch the wax hiss and curl. You wait until the flames consume even your name. The air in Westmere is thicker that week. Or maybe it's just you. No one here knows. Not yet. Your brother, the firstborn, the heir, the golden one, is dead. And you're not. You're standing, breathing, and for the first time in your life, no one is ahead of you. The line ends with you now. You do not cheer. You do not cry. You feel clarity. As if the world, long muffled behind layers of linen and lies, has finally whispered something directly in your ear. You do not rush to the estate. You wait. 2 days. 3. You finish your duties. You sign papers. You answer questions. You walk the halls of Westmere like nothing has changed, because no one knows that everything has. You are grieving, technically. But what does that mean for someone who was never allowed to love openly? You remember Edric's laugh, that sharp, tilted thing that always landed just above your head. You remember the time he held a sword to your neck during sparring and whispered, "You'll always follow." You remember being 12, muddy, humiliated, and aching, and watching him ride past without slowing. You remember and you feel nothing. Not hatred, not joy, just a space where something used to be. When you do return, the castle is quiet. Not mourning, just stunned. Your father is older now, the kind of old that happens overnight. His eyes don't find yours immediately. When they do, they scan you like a ledger. You bow. He doesn't speak. He simply nods, once, and turns away. That's his version of welcome home. The funeral is brief, cold rain. A priest who mutters through the rites like he's counting chickens. A grave dug too shallow. You stand beside it and watch as Edric's body is lowered, wrapped in cloth, face uncovered, for respect or fear. His features are sunken, not serene. His hands are folded. His sword rests with him. The sword that was supposed to be yours. No one says your name. No one says heir. But they all think it. And that's enough. At the wake, the wine flows, but not freely. Mourning has limits. You're approached by nobles, minor lords, distant cousins. They murmur platitudes and test your responses. You are no longer invisible. You are a silhouette filling a vacuum. One man, Lord Brescian, red-faced and vinegar-breathed, leans in and says, "A tragedy, but perhaps fate favors the prepared." You smile. You have prepared. Your whole life has been preparation for a moment no one expected you to survive long enough to reach. That night, you sit in your brother's old room. It still smells like cedar, polish, and overconfidence. You open drawers, read letters, some from your father, some from Isolde. One says, "He is cleverer than we thought." You wonder which of you she meant. You take the letter, you take the room. The next morning, your father calls you into the solar. No preamble, no condolences. Just, "We cannot delay. The titles must be transferred. You'll take the oath before Michaelmas." You nod. You do not thank him. Because this is not a gift. This is gravity. And you are finally allowed to fall upward. He watches you carefully. As if trying to detect poison in a chalice, he poured himself. "Do not disgrace this family," he says. You reply, "I wouldn't know how." It is not meant kindly. He hears it anyway, and says nothing. Outside, the sky is the color of steel. Inside, The hall is silent. You walk its length alone. Each step echoes like prophecy. Not one anyone spoke aloud, just one you became. It happens without thunder. No lightning strikes, no angelic choir. No golden beam from the sky, just a man with a scroll, a bishop with ink-stained fingers, a hall full of faces waiting to see if you stumble. You stand before them in black wool, sober, silent, sharp. Your brother's sword rests on your hip, polished, heavy, ironic. The bishop clears his throat and begins the oath. You repeat it word for word, not because you're loyal, because you have an excellent memory. Do you swear to uphold the laws of the realm, to defend your people, to protect the land given unto your house by God and crown? You pause, just long enough for tension. Then, I do. And just like that, they call you Lord. It doesn't feel like triumph. It feels like confirmation. The quiet, cold click of a door that was always supposed to open. Eventually. After someone else failed to keep it closed. Your father nods, not with pride, with resignation, as if he knew this was inevitable. Isolde watches from the second tier. She does not smile, but she does not look away. You allow yourself a single breath, then step forward to accept the ring, the seal, the responsibilities. None of them fit, but they all belong, now, to you. The first week is paperwork. Boring, brutal, revelatory. You learn that the estate is overextended, that half the grain tithe from the south field never arrived, that the steward's son has been cooking the ledgers with the precision of a monk and the creativity of a poet. You fire him, not with rage, with efficiency. He weeps. You do not. Because now, you're not surviving the system. You are the system. And your hands are finally on the levers. People start looking at you differently, not just with respect, with caution, like you're a blade resting on a table, useful, impressive, and possibly dangerous if mishandled. You do nothing to reassure them. Why would you? You are dangerous now. And the only thing more terrifying than a second son with nothing to lose is a second son who finally gained everything. You hold your first court. A woman begs for land returned. A farmer accuses his neighbor of stealing seed. A boy has broken a noble's window with a slingshot and is dragged in by the ear. You listen. You ask questions. You make decisions. Quick, measured, unflinching. The noble expects leniency. You fine him instead. The crowd murmurs. You let them see. That justice, under your rule, is not based on title, but on attention. And attention is your weapon now. One evening, you dine alone. Not because you're lonely, because you're calculating. You eat slowly, roast duck, parsnips, bread that doesn't shatter your teeth. You pour your own wine. You stare at the empty chair across from you and imagine Edric sitting there, still smirking, still certain, still alive. You raise your glass, not in toast, in farewell. Later that night, Isolde knocks on your chamber door. You open it. She does not step inside. She says only, "You wear it well." You ask, "The ring or the mask?" She doesn't answer, because she doesn't need to. You both know, they're the same thing. Winter arrives like a memory you'd rather not revisit. Slow, damp, and merciless. The castle grows quieter. Fires burn longer. Faces grow wearier. But you stand straighter, because now your name begins letters. Your seal closes treaties. Your voice decides where coin flows, where justice lands, and which fields will be left fallow for rest or punishment. You are no longer the second. You are the one they fear disappointing. But titles, as it turns out, don't fill the hollow. They just echo in it louder. You walk alone often. Through the orchard where Edric once pushed you into a thorn bush. Through the great hall where your father first said duty, like a curse. Through the chapel where you promised, to no one in particular, that you'd find a way to matter. And now, you do. But mattering, it turns out, costs everything, especially the right to disappear. Servants avoid your eyes, not out of guilt, but reverence. Which is worse? Old men bow deeper. Young men try to imitate your gait. You see yourself reflected in their ambition. A second son of another house, watching, waiting, measuring the softness in your face for weakness. You do not offer them kindness. Kindness is how you were ignored for 20 years. Your father dies in early spring. Peacefully, they say, but you know better. He died watching the world tilt toward a son he never trained, never praised, never planned for. At his funeral, you stand stone-faced, not for performance, because grief, when mixed with justice, becomes something heavier, not sad, sober. You visit his chamber one last time. It smells of ink, sweat, and old wool. His ledgers are untouched, his boots still by the hearth. You sit in his chair. You rest your hands where his used to rest. And you speak, not aloud, but into the grain of the wood. I did it, without you. And then, for the first time in years, maybe in your life, you exhale fully. Letters arrive, from barons, from bishops, from men who once forgot your name. They want alliances, fealty, favors. You grant some, you deny others. You play the game now, and the board feels smaller than you remember. Isolde becomes something else. Not a love story, but not cold, either. You meet in corridors occasionally, speak in glances, share silences that say more than oaths. She never calls you by your title. You never ask her why. One night you open the old family scrolls. You trace the names. Firstborn after firstborn after firstborn. Warriors, drunks, martyrs, idiots. And now, you. The one who wasn't meant to be here. The one who came through the side door, silent and burning. You smile. Because legacy isn't about intention. It's about endurance. And you endured. In the end, no one remembers Edric's favorite food or your father's hunting dog. But they will remember the lord who stabilized the estate after